Dr. Sienna Cole thought she felt quite at home on the rinky-dink minibus that stumbled over potholes while the interior was alive with animated chatter and cheerful music. But as the smudgy imprint of their destination appeared on the horizon, the music's volume was reduced, and the travelers fell into an uneasy, somber silence. Dr. Cole could not help but feel that they were really about to enter hell, not just a location which had been granted by the local population the tongue-in-cheek moniker of El Inferno. Although the reality might have fallen some way short of the literal abode of the damned, its very real risk to life and limb was well known, and inside, Dr. Cole's stomach was churning with nerves. "I'd take an extra magazine if I were you," Manuel said, handing Dr. Cole another packet of pistol bullets. "Ta, mate, but I'm feeling optimistic," Dr. Cole said with full confidence. The minibus then came to a halt in front of a gate patrolled by border guards. It was a jarring sight to see border security right smack in the middle of a country. But even though they would not be crossing any official national borders, Dr. Cole was well aware that the state's de facto power ended the moment you stepped beyond that fence. Dr. Cole and Manuel walked up to the guards, and one agent came forward. "Papers?" he snapped. Manuel showed his, and the guard waved him through. Dr. Cole presented hers, and the guard's face darkened into a scowl. "Globally renowned academic?" he asked, eyeing her information. "Are you stupid, lady? The second someone in there recognizes you, they'll grab you and try and ransom you back to the Australian government. No worries, mate. I'll keep my cake hole shut when I get in there. I'm just some adventure-loving tourist called Tina," Cole said. The guard swore in Spanish. "Fine. Just so everyone knows, I did warn you." The guard stepped out of the way, and Cole joined Manuel on the other side. "We must be crazy," Manuel said as the pair set off along the cracked and potholed road. Scattered along its edges were rusty, burnt-out cars and mounds of trash, remnants of when the area was just another part of the greater metropolitan area. They crossed the no-man's land and stood before a crumbling concrete bridge, which crossed a wide, decrepit open sewer channel, which let off a foul stench. "The locals call it the Dream Bridge," Manuel explained. "Sounds romantic," Cole said, scrunching her face up against the fetid miasma. "It's because some people hallucinate with the fumes when they walk over it," he continued. "That's one for the travel brochure," Cole responded as they briskly walked over it. The pair passed a few rough-looking people going the other way. They moved to give them a wide berth. In the middle of the bridge was a long, burnt-out shell of a bus, and inside were huddled some wretched-looking men who grumbled incoherently as they passed, sat amid a pile of empty beer bottles. "Don't make eye contact," Manuel advised. "That's usually seen as a challenge around here." They reached the other side of the bridge and walked into a dishevelled but dense crowd. Throngs of people shuffled around, buying and selling from mouldy stalls on the ground. Patched tents, sleeping bags, and fly-ridden piles of rags were scattered everywhere along the road. One passerby gave Dr. Cole a sharp shove out of the way as he passed. "They're bloody aggro around here," Cole complained, rubbing her arm. "The outer circle has good reason to be," Manuel said. "And why is that?" "These are people who've angered the gangs, so they can't go into El Inferno, but they don't have any papers, so they can't get past the border. So they stay here on the ring road, which used to be called outer circular road. So they got the name, the Outer Circle. Fair enough. I'd chuck a darkie too if it was me stuck in that position, Cole said, inwardly burning with fury at the unjust squalor the people were facing. The duo emerged at the other side of the outer circle, and were met with a sudden, sheer wall of reds, blues, whites and greens, accented with rust, mold and graffiti. They were shipping containers, stacked high and as wide as could be seen, to the left and to the right. They were piled on evenly, like a clumsily assembled Jenga tower, which gave the impression that it may topple over at any moment. Windows and chimneys had been cut into some of them, flags and washing lines were strung between them, and sometimes shapes of people walking on exposed parts of their ceilings could be glimpsed. Crikey, Cole gasped, stunned by the grimy grandeur of El Inferno, the city of the damned. This way, Manuel said, and disappeared into a crack between shipping containers. Cole then realized the seemingly solid wall was filled with narrow alleyways created by the containers not being pushed flush with each other's edges. Cole followed Manuel and entered into a lengthy, jagged walkway. Cole could touch the two walls at the same time if she lifted both arms. It was dark, damp, and it stunk. The path split off into a dizzyingly large number of other walkways, snaking in all directions between containers. Hazardous and sometimes literally sparking electric lights were strung up everywhere. Everything was covered in graffiti, and most prominently, it was saturated with people. Manuel and Cole pushed through the tight spaces, moving through the human medium like it was some viscous fluid. People were selling things, wedged into tight corners between shipping containers. Others were cooking outside. Some looked like their exposed corner was their squalid home. The pair took a sharp turn, and Manuel suddenly stopped, Cole bumping into him. Liquid had just splashed to the ground somewhere in front of them. Cole looked up. The space above was filled with improvised walkways between shipping containers, staircases, even what looked like pulley-operated elevators that had been built with scrap. They ran all the way up to the thin strip of blue that was the only indication that the sky existed in the murky eternal twilight of El Inferno. She spotted the figure of a man holding a pot over the edge of a wooden walkway between containers about 3 stories up, before he retreated out of sight. The pair stepped over the puddle, which to Cole's disgust turned out to be filled with feces and urine. Eventually the pair emerged into a more open area, like a clearing in the forest of containers. In it was a range of huts made of scrap materials, a number of benches, and what passed for a sort of public square. At the far end, multiple containers had been hollowed out to make a type of open-fronted, multi-story building. "This is one of the town halls," Manuel muttered to Cole. "There's more than one?" "This part's governed by the Yakuza. They run most of their Latin American operations from here. So this is their town hall. The other gangs who run other parts have their own. Japan isn't exactly close, mate. Only the leaders are actually Yakuza. They mostly employ locals as boots on the ground." They left the bustling square behind and re-entered the dark labyrinth. They passed a burly, thuggish-looking man wearing a grubby outfit with a flame icon on it. "Diablos," Manuel whispered. "Bloody what now?" "They're like the cops around here. The gangs all got together a few years back and set them up. They're there to crack skulls if any trouble starts." "Sounds like the coppers back in Straya, just more honest," Cole muttered, as they walked down an alley whose floor was running with a stream of filthy water. There wasn't very many people in this area, and the graffiti and decoration started to take on a theme. skulls and skeletons. The people they did see wore dark clothes and shied away when they approached, until the dark lamp-lit ship container skyscrapers felt like they were full of barely audible whisperings between ghosts. "I'd say we're defo getting close," Cole said, starting to shiver, even though the space was tight, humid, and hot. "Just around the next bend," Manuel confirmed. They turned and the container started to be spread further apart, into a sort of atrium which led to a gate, constructed with rusty metal and chains. Dangled over it were skeleton dolls, posters with skulls on them, decorated with brightly coloured flowers. A roughly painted sign was attached to the top of the gate, which read, Jardín de la Santa Muerte. What got Cole's immediate attention, however, was the group of burly armed guards with badly drawn skull tattoos on their face that were waiting for them. Manuel walked over to them and spoke in Spanish, while Cole shuffled awkwardly on the spot, her hand hovering close to the holster where her pistol sat. Cole breathed a sigh of relief when the men seemed to come to an agreement, and they opened the gate which squealed on its hinges, making Cole's face cringe as the noise attacked her ears. They entered into another area, free of shipping containers, so it was actually bathed in sunlight. It was a garden, of sorts, with flowers being grown in rough soil patches, with pots burning some sort of incense between them. In the centre was a statue, constructed of scrap, depicting a skeleton dressed in a cloak, seemingly made of old clothes and tarpaulin clumsily stitched together. Although it had no hair, there was something about the statue that was unmistakably female. The area was scattered with people in the act of worshipping the statue. "Saint Death," Cole said in a tone of interested caution as she stood at the skeleton's feet, which were made of welded together steel beams and trash cans. "Patron of the downtrodden," Manuel replied. "Everybody's got to have somebody looking out for them, I suppose," Cole said. But something caught her eye. "Who's that bloke?" Coming towards them was a half-dressed man in a cloak, with a skull tattoo on his face. His body was also a drawing board of tattoos, which looked much more like the traditional gang signs. "He's a priest," Manuel whispered. "Probably a drug dealer or something in his day job." The priest spoke to Manuel in Spanish for a few minutes. It seemed to get heated at a point, and Cole began to worry that they were not making a good first impression on their hosts. However, the priest seemed to be satisfied in the end. "He's agreed to take us to see the matriarch," Manuel whispered to Cole. "Yes, let's do it," Cole said. Then she took a deep breath in and tried to clear her head. She needed to be on the ball for this part. If she ended up blowing it, well, she'd probably be dead by multiple gunshot wounds before she had time to regret it. The priest led them into what looked like some sort of sanctuary, constructed out of bent and welded together parts of shipping containers. It was somewhere between a metal wigwam and a church. Inside it was a scrap heap throne, surrounded by attendants and armed guards who prevented them getting too close. Upon the throne sat a woman in her 40s, olive skin, short black hair with a few speckles of glistening grey, and a skull face tattoo much more intricate than the others. Manuel spoke to the guards in Spanish, but was cut off by the enthroned woman, who spoke in perfect English and an Australian accent. "Well, if it ain't my old cobber, the famous Dr. Cole. I never thought I'd see you again," the woman said in delighted surprise. Her tone sounded friendly, but Cole knew she was anything but. "This place isn't exactly our old dorm back at uni, Susie. But all you need is a coldie of an arvo to bring out the nostalgia," Cole replied, holding the woman's gaze. The woman, Susie, snapped in Spanish at her guards, who stood out of the way. Come on up and let me get a look at you. Cole gave Manuel a watch my back look before walking forward and climbing the few steps to the makeshift throne. You look rough, Susie said bluntly, raising one eyebrow as Cole approached. Cole knew exactly what she was referring to, because everyone said it to her who hadn't seen her in a while. Cole's once elegant face was crisscrossed with raised scars. Spent too long lying in the sunbake, it got a little toasty, Cole said. She always felt embarrassed by her new face, but she refused to cover it up on principle. Susie leant in and whispered, so only Cole could hear. Who did it? She asked. Cole chuckled. Just the enraged spirit of a certain ancient Babylonian monarch. Susie was not an easy woman to shock, but what she heard did the trick. The dead king? She asked in disbelief. I should have pulled a sickie that day. The dig didn't exactly go to plan. Why would you ever go dig that thing up for? That's literally asking for it. Don't look at me. I didn't want to. I just got involved to try and minimize the damage. Then who was it then? James Butterworth. Susie let out a series of curses in Spanish. It gets worse, Cole continued. The dead king possessed him. Venga, ya! It's bad enough it was a Butterworth, but that Butterworth? As I said, the whole thing turned into a dog's breakfast, Cole shrugged. Should I start preparing for the end of the world now? Susie sighed. So far, beyond starting a riot in Stockholm, Jimmy's kept a lid on it. Maybe he's better at resisting the dead king's will than I thought. Or what? He's planning the end of the world, Cole said with a sheepish smile. You can't have come out all this way just to give me bad news? Susie asked with exasperation. I came to see one of your, Cole considered how to put it, co-religionists. What bizzo could you have with one of Saint Death's children? Susie scoffed. Oh, it's just a little birdie told me a few months back that a bloke who can't seem to die has been held up here in El Inferno, and that he might have something to do with you lot, Cole explained. Immediately Cole could tell that Susie wasn't pleased where this was going. I know you're the type of Sheila who knows everything, so I'm not going to pry into how you found out. But the Immortal One is a central part of our family here. The secrets of Saint Death live in his veins. I'm happy to yak on all day about the dead king, but I won't have nowt of you sticking your nose into our business, Susie hissed, her disturbing fanaticism rising to the surface. Rightio. I just want a word with him is all, Cole said defensively. Susie let out a snort. You can't just book an appointment. He speaks to who he wants, when he wants. I know, but I know there's a way you lot use to get him to come out of his shell, Cole said knowingly. Be careful what you say, mate, Susie breathed. Cole leaned in and whispered in Susie's tattooed ear. I hear he comes out to play, if you just give him a prezi. Susie stared at Cole, the cogs in her head audibly whirring as she decided how to respond. Are you willing to let someone die just to talk to the Immortal One? You're even more of a cold-hearted harpy than you used to be. Oh, I wouldn't ask that type of favour, mate. Don't worry. I figured I'd step up and do it myself, Cole said. You'll sacrifice yourself? Susie spat, shock evident in her voice. You've really lost it this time. As long as I get a minute to have a few words with him, maybe. Yeah, Cole responded, staring Susie in the eye. Susie did not seem to know what to make of her old friend and occasional enemy's request. She stared for a few long minutes until she responded. I know you, Sienna. You're a sly old roo. You've got some sort of angle, and I know you're not going to tell me about it. Cole shrugged and smiled playfully. So are we good to go? Sure, But I just hope whatever mad plan you've got up in that head of yours, it doesn't go the same way as it did with James Butterworth. Susie relented. Can't guarantee, mate, but I promise I'll pull my finger out and do my best. A few hours later, Cole was put through a series of bizarre rituals, including dousing her body in scented oils and entwining her hair with flowers. She was then paraded around the statue of Saint Death 7 times, while the priest spoke in Spanish to a crowd of skull-faced worshippers. Once the gauntlet of ritualistic preparation concluded, they placed her naked on what was a sort of litter made from the nailed-together remnants of a table and chairs. This was carried on the shoulders of a number of the worshippers. Do I really have to be in the nutty? Cole asked uncomfortably, looking down at Susie, who was walking beside the macabre parade, which moved into the shadows of the shipping container labyrinth. The Immortal One will not accept ritually impure offerings, and this is just how it's done, Susie said, as if that was all the explanation that anyone could possibly need. After a good 15 minutes of walking through the container slums, they arrived at what looked like the edge of a sinkhole, where many containers had fallen inside, but one had a padlock on it, like some sort of access door. The parade stopped, and more Spanish prayers were conducted. The priest then produced a key and opened the padlock. Together, a few worshippers wrenched the heavy container door open, and Cole stared down into a featureless inky blackness. I'm devo what has to happen down in there, Cole said to herself. No matter what she had seen in her storied career so far, she could never shake the fear of total darkness. As an archaeologist, she always brought a good torch with her. Is there any way I can convince you to give it up? Susie asked at the last minute as Cole stood at the edge of the abyss. Not a chance, mate, she said. Susie nodded, finding her emotions at that moment too complicated and confused for her to express them. So she just clapped Cole on the shoulder and stood back out of the way. Cole clenched her jaw, closed her eyes, and summoning the depths of her considerable courage, she stepped forward and fell into the darkness. First, there was a moment of free fall, where she felt her stomach leap up into her throat. Then a crunch where her backside impacted something, causing a metallic crashing noise. This was then followed by another, longer period of falling, until she smashed into what felt like a metal floor, covered in dirt. Crikey, that hurt, she exclaimed, as the wind was driven out of her body, which was racked with the pain of impact. With her right leg shaking uncontrollably, Cole tried to get back on her feet, knowing she was more vulnerable lying down. The darkness was absolute. She had no idea how big the room was, or what was in it. Hello? She called, tentatively moving forward. Gil? It's me, Sienna Cole. There was a slight echo, but not much. That meant she was in a large, but certainly not enormous space. She decided to continue calling out to her target. You can come out, Gil. It's really smart how you've tricked these drongos into catering for your screwed up habits. Cole tripped over something and landed painfully on her knees. She swore at the pain. Come on, Gil, this isn't funny, she said, scrambling back to her feet, panic starting to be evident in her voice. You know who I am. Remember we took on that elemental on the Isle of Man? Still, there was silence and darkness. Cole began to feel like the place was getting smaller and smaller as the seconds went by, and she would soon be crushed into a bloody cube by the incoming walls. You're in danger, Gil, Cole called out, breathing heavily. You need to get out of here. Someone's coming for you. Cole hit up against one of the unseen walls, scaring herself. She stumbled backwards and almost fell again. Was the floor slightly sloped? The disorientating darkness had made her unsure what was up and down, never mind left or right. Cole started moving her head rapidly side to side, then turning around, trying to see something, anything. She started to feel like she was surrounded, that there was a crowd of people just beyond her arm's length who could see her, but she couldn't see them. Soon, the sensation became overwhelming, and Cole panicked. She let out a frightened yell, ran in one direction blindly, stopped and ran in the other. "Gil! Gil! Help!" she shrieked as she imagined hands reaching out of the blackness, wrapping their unseen fingers around her limbs and digging their claws into her flesh. Then she let out one desperate, terrified yell and ran full pelt into the darkness. The next moment, she smashed up against something. Her body was thrown back, and she landed hard on the ground. Tearful and gasping, Cole writhed and wiggled. She needed to run, to escape, but not knowing where or how. Panting and gasping, she flailed her arms around, looking for something to grab. Eventually, as she threw away another clump of dirt or piece of trash, her hand landed on something very distinct. It was the smooth and unmistakable shape of a woman's leather boot. Gil wasn't a woman. Something was wrong. Cole moved up the boot to discover it was attached to a leg. Cole got onto her knees, pushing her hands up over leather clothes, passing what felt like a waist, then a torso, then shoulders, then finally, she felt the texture of exposed flesh between her fingers. Then there was light. A lamp in the stranger's hand came on. Cole was so startled that she leapt backwards and ended up on her back again, crawling away from the figure. Illuminated in the yellow light was a tall woman in long leather boots, a leather skirt, jacket and hat. The outfit seemed almost Victorian in style, accented with brass buckles. The hat had a black floral ornament attached to it. Her face was the strangest thing. It was still, rigid, almost like a corpse in rigor mortis. Her eyes were alive with intelligence, but at the same time, totally dead, empty, and pitiless. Where's Gil? Cole asked, barely being able to articulate the words, as the woman seemed somehow to be putting pressure on her without actually making physical contact. The woman turned her head stiffly to the left, and a man walked into the light. "Gil," Cole said, recognizing him. "You have to go. She's come to—" Cole stopped talking as she noticed the blank, vacuous expression on his face. "We do have to go," the woman said, her female voice sounding somehow robotic or artificial, like talking did not come natural to her. She turned and walked away, the seemingly hypnotized Gil blindly following dumbly behind her. "Stop!" Cole yelled feebly, as the woman reached a staircase that had been hidden in the darkness. "Leave him alone!" "I would not have located him if I did not follow you," the woman said stiffly. She then raised one hand and pushed at something above her, which lifted up and out of the way. Suddenly, a stream of daylight poured in. The subservient Gil climbed out wordlessly, and the woman followed after him. Now being able to see quite well, Cole got on her feet and sprinted after them, aiming to fight the demonic woman hand to hand if she had to. "My master extends his thanks for your help in locating the target," the woman said blankly, as Cole closed the distance between them. But in the last second, the woman slammed the door above closed behind her, and Cole was once more left to drown in total and complete darkness. There was nobody to bear witness to her anguish. Nobody to hear her bellows, insults, demands, empty threats, and her desperate pleas. In the blackness, on the ground, under El Inferno, there was weeping and grinding of teeth.